What's up, guys, and welcome to One Take. I'm Gil, and today we're talking about The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 5, Chapter 13, and I'm here with my brother slash tech guy, Alon.
Yo.
My good friend, Jeremy.
Hello.
My great friend, Dan.
Yes, hello.
I like to switch it up every week. And I'm going to say spoiler warning. Of course, spoilers through Season 2, Episode 5. And even the title of this episode is kind of a spoiler. I'll say it in a couple seconds. There's just your chance to leave. If you haven't seen the episode yet, the title is The Jedi. Anyway, let's jump into overall thoughts on the episode. I'll kick it over to Jeremy first because I feel bad for calling Dan my great friend and you my good friend.
I appreciate that, Gil, my acquaintance. I thought the episode was very good. Like my initial, and we're very close to it. This is probably the closest we've done a review to having watched the episode for me. So maybe I'm just riding really high. This could be one of the best episodes of the show ever. I would say is my initial take. I just really liked the action. I thought was way better than the action from last week, especially the stuff at the end where there's kind of the Wild West duel happening at the same time as the lightsaber Beskar staff fight. All the plot stuff was great. A lot of good reveals. I just really, really liked this episode. I thought it was everything I like about Mandalorian as a series in one episode.
Awesome. Dan, what did you think?
Could not agree more. I think for me, this episode is, I would say, definitely the best of season 2 and just as good as the season finale last season, probably even better. I think, just the deepening of the world, more and more information just pouring out halfway through this one about Baby Yoda, whose name we will soon be able to officially reveal. I'll let Gil do that one. But I thought it was great from start to finish. I love Ahsoka as a new character. I thought that she jumped off the screen in a way that I was really happy with. So, I was all about this one.
I agree with a lot of what both of you said. For me, previously, I think episode 3 this season, the one where Bo-Katan was introduced, was my favorite of the season. I think this episode edged that one out. It had similar great action, I thought. But on top of that, you had even more reveals, like Dan said. Plus, you again had a great supporting character with Ahsoka Tano. And I thought it was a really solid episode. I liked it. There were a few things I didn't love, and I won't beat a dead horse here because it's kind of a similar complaint I've had with previous episodes, which is the story of the week I didn't as much buy into. The villagers, the magistrate, definitely the character of Lang, the guy that Mando had the gunslinger fight with later in the episode. Didn't really care about that particular conflict, but putting that aside, all of the Ahsoka Tano stuff, all of the kind of intrigue we got, the action itself, I thought was pretty awesome. Alon, what about you?
I think you and I are probably on the same page. I thought it was a good episode, definitely one of the best, but I've got some minor nitpicks, which, like you, very similar to other episodes.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll get into all of that when we break down the episode. Huh? What's that, Dan?
Just consensus all around.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the details. So we have a cold open where we see Ahsoka Tano attacking soldiers from this village. The first time I think we've seen lightsabers in this show, besides maybe the Darksaber. Then she approaches the magistrate sitting at the top of the gate. Very Game of Thrones. Reminded me of Daenerys approaching the queen at the top of the gate. And Ahsoka's yelling up at her. She wants some information. The magistrate refuses. Ahsoka says, "You have 1 day to surrender or I'm going to come back and keep killing people until you give me this information." So let's start with this opening scene. I mean, I thought it was really cool to see lightsabers again and see them used a little bit differently than we're used to in the movies. We had this sort of stealthy Batman-style attack where she would pop up in corners, take out bad guys. So I thought that was a very cool way to open up the episode. Dan, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree. Good call about this being the first time we're seeing lightsabers here. I thought it was great seeing the double, her wielding both at once. I think, a huge part of the stealth thing that you mentioned is just the design of this world. I thought was really great. The kind of burned, charred, kind of forest fire kind of look. Thought was awesome. So that definitely helps have her, be able to pop up wherever she needed to be. So I thought it was a great intro. I wasn't sure how they were going to reveal her. I thought it was going to be maybe from Mando's perspective, meeting her, but I loved how they just sort of came right out with it and introed her in the top.
Right. And one of the things we've repeatedly called out for this show is the way they're able to create very unique environments from one episode to another. And in this episode, it was definitely very noticeable. Like you said, it's this charred out, very different looking world that I thought was pretty cool. Jeremy, anything to add for the cold open?
It was awesome when she like cut that part out of the tree and then used the force to throw it at that dude. Like the action was all just really good from top to bottom. But that part, they start right out of the gate with great stuff. Really cool. And
even just, I want to add the look of Ahsoka. You know, it's always, I was curious to see how are they going to translate this animated character to live action. And I thought she looked great. I was worried it could come off a little bit cheesy, but I thought it looked great throughout the episode. From there, we cut to Mandalorian on the Razor Crest approaching Corvus, which is where we just started the episode. As they approach, Mando insists that Baby Yoda sit down in his seat, but he wants that ball he's always playing with on, I guess, the Razor Crest stick shift. I don't know what that thing is. And he sits down.
Can't be too important to the landing process, I guess.
Right, exactly. Well, I assume the stick still works, even if that ball is removed. Like, that probably just helps to grip it. Alon, what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then we see Yoda start to use the Force to pull that ball away. They land. Mando and Baby Yoda get off the ship. Baby Yoda has that ball. Mando takes it away from him. When they get to town, they see that everybody in town is pretty scared, clearly living under the tyrannical rule of that magistrate. Some soldiers approach Mandalorian and say that the magistrate wants to see him. And on the way to go see her, we see 3 prisoners kind of strapped to these posts being electrocuted, which I thought was pretty dark. It kind of reminded me of Dracula, how he would have the heads of his enemies on pikes outside of his fortress. So Jeremy, what did you think of our introduction to this town and anything we just talked about?
Yeah, I totally agree. It was kind of dark. I think my maybe it was just my warped church going mind from a kid, but it made me think of like people on crosses, those electrocution stuff. And I thought it was a really cool setup. Like you're instantly interested in this town because of the way that the guy like shoos the children away, and the shopkeeper turns her back on Mando when he tries to interact with her, and you kind of want to know, what else is going on here. And I was so much more interested in this. Like, I get what you're saying, how it is just a new insert of town that they go to and stuff, but I found myself wanting to know more about what was going on there.
I definitely agree with that. On an emotional level, that's kind of where it didn't work for me. I just didn't get too invested in the villagers. But in terms of being intriguing, the conflict between Ahsoka and the magistrate, was very interested to know what that was all about, especially since at first Ahsoka almost comes off as the aggressor. She's the one attacking the town. So I was curious where that was going, curious why everybody was so skittish and afraid to talk to the Mandalorian. So I definitely agree with you on that level. It worked for me. And then he goes to see the magistrate, and she says, I have a proposition that may interest you. And one of my favorite lines of the episode, the Mandalorian says, my price is high. because we've seen him take so many jobs this season, and
by peer pressure alone sometimes.
Right, exactly. Now, to be fair, usually it's a good buddy of his, somebody he knows, but just after seeing 4 episodes of, hey, we're working on your ship in the meantime, you want to go do a mission? To hear my price is high.
For old time's sake.
So the magistrate tells him that she has a Jedi plaguing her, and she wants the Mandalorian to go kill that Jedi. And in return, she offers him a spear made of pure Beskar. And I thought it was pretty cool where he hits it against his armor and you hear that ringing as though he's testing to see what this thing is made of. So kill the Jedi and the spear is yours. So Dan, any thoughts on Mando's meeting with the magistrate?
I was pretty interested. Yeah, I think the magistrate character is kind of intriguing. It's funny, this season they've introduced a lot of the same types of roles on various planets. Like we've gotten 2 magistrates and 2 different marshals, which are sort of different, I think, roles than we've ever seen in Star Wars before. But I thought it was great. Yeah, the whole subjugation of the town. And I loved the moment when Mando kind of enters the inner kind of sanctum of the magistrate, and suddenly all of the smoke and the kind of blight of the rest of the village is sort of melts away, and we've got this serene, kind of beautiful garden. I thought that was great. And yeah, introducing the spear in the garden, I think it was pretty clear at that point that we were going to have definitely symbol, we were probably going to return to that scene in the garden later. And the fact that we did for the end of the episode with the spear was telegraphed at the beginning, but really, really nicely paid off. So yeah, I loved everything about the location and the design of this place.
Yeah, it got me excited to see what happens when Beskar goes up against a lightsaber. And of course, we find out shortly after this, actually, because then the Mandalorian heads out with Lang, the guy he's going to have a duel with later. The guy says, what is that thing? Points at Baby Yoda. Mandalorian says, I keep it around for luck. And Lang says, you're going to need it where you're heading.
Wherever he goes, I go.
So he was probably my least favorite part of the episode because I felt like he was basically shoehorned in just so that Ahsoka has the villain, the magistrate, and they needed somebody for the Mandalorian to also duel with. So they added this hired gun to be in there. But I don't know. I just found all of his lines kind of made me laugh. So didn't love that character.
He had kind of his own little Beskar armor situation going on, right? With like the shoulder pads. I think that was kind of interesting. I know. I wish we'd gotten a little bit more. I said like, oh, you think he's ex-military? Even just a line or two about who he was, where he fit into the storyline past, I thought would have been a little bit better. But.
Yeah. Or I think what would have done it for me is maybe a scene where we see how competent he is. So Ahsoka's taking out all of these men and taking out all these soldiers. If we had seen that he is more of a formidable foe, so when he shows up at the end, we're worried. But instead, up until then, he had a few snappy one-liners, but didn't get the feeling that he was going to be somebody that would give the Mandalorian, a hard time in any way. But moving on from that, Mandalorian heads to the forest, and Ahsoka shows up. They have a little fight where we see that Beskar is capable of blocking a lightsaber. In the middle of the battle, Mandalorian finally shouts out, "Bo-Katan sent me," and kind of calms things down.
The magic words.
That's right. Jeremy, what did you think of the first time that Ahsoka and Din Djarin met?
I thought it was cool. I mean, we see, it's two characters that people are pretty familiar with, and you get to see them like face off. That's always kind of a cool moment. And you see them both doing their thing. They're both experts in their field. There's not a clear advantage here, just in case you thought there might have been because, lightsabers can, beat everything. I guess not. But it was cool. It was it was a fun moment. I liked it, but it didn't go on too long or anything like that.
Yeah, and we had cool uses of the Force where he throws the rope around her and then she kind of jumps over the tree, pulls him up. Thought it was a good battle, like you said, pretty evenly matched, but ended. So the problem with that sometimes is you have to make it seem realistic that the battle comes to an end. When you have two forces that are pretty equal, suddenly one of them wins and it can feel kind of awkward, but here it felt pretty organic. I like that scene. But yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think it's kind of a classic way now that the show has established a pattern of introducing like allies that he encounters on the road that like seem like they're going to be hostile to him at first. Like with Cara Dune's character in the first season, they have this sort of same kind of like standoff shootout. They come, fight each other, and then wait a second, you're so-and-so. And it's sort of the same idea here.
Yeah, it's the classic comic book crossover where the two have to fight before they become friends. Right. Because part of being a hero is not really trusting too many people, So
it's a dangerous world out there.
That's right. So we get to nightfall, and Ahsoka is sitting across from Baby Yoda, and you kind of hear him. We've been mentioning that he's been getting more and more vocal lately. So here we hear kind of like he's sort of purring almost. So it seems like they're communicating. And Mandalorian asks her, "You can understand him?" And she says, "Sort of. We're basically communicating telepathically." She says she can kind of feel what he's saying. And we get a pretty big information download on Baby Yoda. First off, we figure out his name is Grogu.
Huh?
Dan, was that you?
That was me doing the turn around when he hears his name.
I loved that. Every time Mandalorian says Grogu, Baby Yoda or Grogu looks up at him, and it's just like it was like a dog when you call out their name and they get their attention. We find out that he was raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I
close
think
enough.
you could. Yeah, that works.
Coruscant.
Yeah, Coruscant.
All
Yeah,
I've got it spelled phonetically here in my notes. And at the end of the Clone War, when the Empire rose to power, Grogu was hidden away. Then someone took him from the temple. From there, his memory goes dark. Ahsoka also name drops Yoda here, saying she only knew one other that looked like this creature, the wise Jedi Master Yoda. And then she asks the Mandalorian if Grogu can still wield the Force. And Mandalorian asks, "You mean his powers?" So I think we've talked before about how strange it is that Mandalorian is repeatedly kind of confused by Baby Yoda or Grogu's use of the Force. And especially since we've heard Mandalorian say, "May the Force be with you," or at least not be super thrown off by that line. But I took from this moment that he's heard of the Force, but he probably just thinks it's this weird religious saying and doesn't realize it actually manifests as some kind of power in the real world. That was kind of my interpretation of that moment.
Just to jump in,
go
I
ahead.
kind of think that Mando's worldview seems to align kind of nicely with Han Solo's when we first meet him in A New Hope, where like he's heard of it, he kind of like respects the concept, but sort of doesn't believe it's real. And then it's only until they encounter someone who can actually use the Force, who actually does claim to be part of this, the part of the Jedi, that they're like, wait, really? So
right. After this whole adventure, we could maybe see Mando deliver a similar line as Han Solo in The Force Awakens. "It's real, all of it." That great moment in the trailer. The scene kind of wraps up when the Mandalorian says, "I need to bring Grogu back to the Jedi." Ahsoka says the Jedi Order fell a long time ago. Mando says, "So did the Empire, but they still hunt him." So they're still around. I'm assuming some Jedi are still around. And then Ahsoka says, "Let him sleep. I'll test him in the morning." Jeremy, any other thoughts on this scene and all these reveals?
No, I mean, it was a lot of stuff. It was a little, I think I was okay with it in spite of it being such like a semi-absurd narrative device to be like, oh yeah, no, he can like talk to me, even though he can't talk to anyone else. Like, it's similar to, I guess in the second episode when the frog woman like plugs into the, the robot and can suddenly communicate. It's like, oh yeah, we use this as like this big plot hurdle for the entire series so far, that this tiny creature can't talk, but now all of a sudden we get like a and they almost did 2-in-1 cliche narrative things. Like we get a big exposition-y dump, and then also at the end of it, and then his memory blacks out. Like he doesn't remember past there. So, but I think like having said all those things, normally those are things I would have had more problems with, but I was okay with it. I think it works. I think it's like established that stuff like that can happen with the Force in the way that they have the Force set up and Jedi's set up, or whatever she wants to call herself now, I guess, set up. But yeah, I thought it was cool. It was interesting, and it was a fun new twist to the Mando Grogu dynamic.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I really loved this scene, that sitting around the campfire. I thought it was just a kind of a great, it's an exposition scene, but frankly, as far, 13 episodes now into the show, and I think these are the beginnings of the answers that I think a lot of fans have been wanting to hear in such certain explicit terms for since the start of the series. So I was eating it up. I could have basically watched an entire episode of just this whole like campfire conversation between these two. So yeah, I thought it was great. It raises a ton of questions, about Grogu's past. Who, I mean, I'll just come out and say it: is he the son of Yoda? I think that is a pretty obvious thing that we're supposed to be left wondering. And just more about his backstory. I love that they sort of directly tied him to the Jedi Order on Coruscant, and I'm hooked. This is what we've been waiting for. So I'm on board.
And Coruscant is a pretty big location, right? The galactical capital, basically. We saw it, I think, for the first time in the Return of the Jedi Special Edition, but it was in all of the prequels. It's this big city planet, right? Alon, what about you? Any thoughts? We haven't called on you in a bit on this scene, or anything that we haven't we talked about before you didn't comment on.
Oh, which scene?
Which scene? The scene of learning all this information about Grogu.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I like that he has a name now, and I feel bad because I think Mando likes calling him Kid. but clearly he's not allowed to anymore. He needs to use his name so that way Grogu can perk up. Those are all my thoughts.
Dan, I got to hear that impression one more time.
Oh no, you got to say the name
right.
for me to be,
Grogu. Perfect. Do we think, by the way, you mentioned there's a lot of questions here. Will the name Grogu catch on with the general public, or will he forever be known as Baby Yoda? Will people keep saying Baby Yoda memes, or will they now say Grogu memes?
I think it's Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda.
Well, especially so we have a WhatsApp group with some of our friends, and we're always sending Baby Yoda memes. But I don't think 90% of the people in that group chat even watch the show, so it's gonna be tough to get them on board with Grogu.
All right.
I'm trying to think. Is there like a historical is there an example that we can try to equate this to? Like something's become massively popular and then they change the name or it takes on a new name. I'll let that'll simmer in the back burner.
I don't know if there's precedent for this, but I do think it's going to be something people argue over. For some reason, what it reminded me of is 28 Days Later. If somebody hasn't seen that movie, or even if they have, they'll say, oh yeah, it's a zombie movie. And then fans will say, they're not zombies, they're rage-infected humans. I think that's the template for this argument. It's not Baby Yoda, it's Grogu.
Well, they tried.
Though it might be Yoda's baby.
What about the athletes? What about Meta World Peace, Ron Artest, or Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali? Maybe there's something like that. Although I don't know. They became famous more after the name change than before it. So,
Gil, that's a great call. This might not be Yoda as a baby, but he might actually be Yoda's baby, which I think is kind of an
Yoda baby
version. So I think that's a great call. I think culturally we are forever going to call this character Baby Yoda, no matter how many other kind of pseudonyms the show throws at us. I mean, they tried the child. You remember when the toy came out last year for Christmas? They're like, no, this isn't Baby Yoda, it's the child. And no, nice try.
Well, there's a new chia plant thing.
Oh, that's right,
Baby Yoda, and on the box I think it says the child.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're in uncertain times. We'll see what happens. The next morning, it's time for Ahsoka to put Grogu to the test. She tries to get him to use the Force to move a stone, but he doesn't do it. He's afraid. He's been keeping his powers hidden to stay safe, even though, as Alon pointed out, he used them to steal cookies last episode. Otherwise, though, he's been afraid to use them because he wants to stay safe and undiscovered. But she asks the Mandalorian to try because clearly Grogu has a relationship with him. So the Mandalorian takes out the ball from the stick shift. He tries the rock first. Grogu still doesn't budge. But when he takes out that ball, you want the ball? And that gets him to use the Force. Mandalorian gets excited, but Ahsoka refuses to train him, saying that his attachment to you, Mandalorian, makes him vulnerable to fear. And I've seen what this can do to a Jedi, to the best of us even. And who are they talking about there, Jeremy?
They're referring to Anakin Skywalker, I believe, in that classic Jedi trope here. Don't want to train him.
Jeremy, there's your answer. Anakin's the real name, but we culturally call him Darth Vader. We always will.
That's fair. We did learn his real name, but everyone still calls him, Darth Vader. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is the classic Jedi thing. This is the Yoda to the young Anakin wanting to be trained by, or Qui-Gon wanting to train the young Anakin, and Yoda being like, you can't do that. He's too old. That
Luke
old.
To Rey, same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Jedis don't want to train people because they say it's too late, and then
it's just ageism.
Yeah, you'd think
Jedi
at a certain point they would learn that, actually, we should probably just try to do it anyway because the consequences are way worse when you do this weird in between thing.
They're not going to give up. They're just going to want to be trained. It's either you got to formalize it or
Alon, were you about to say something?
Oh no, I was just calling those Jedis lazy. They're like, I don't feel like training them. They're going to be evil if I do. So
that's right. It did make me wonder who is a good candidate for a Jedi, because just about every time we see a kid with powers, it's always, you're too emotional, I can't train you. So you need a 4 or 5 year old that has latent Jedi abilities, but has no attachments to anyone. And was there any hesitation around Luke? Was he the one where people were ready to train him? There was hesitation.
Totally. Yeah. When he went to Dagobah and Empire Strikes Back, that was the first time, the first kind of scene that Jeremy's talking about of hesitation on the master's part of like, no, this is too dangerous. That was that Yoda and Obi-Wan were like, I don't know. He's like 20 plus years old. Like he's ancient. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Grogu's 50, so he's in an even worse boat. So Ahsoka
comparatively, but according to the longevity, the age life expectancy of his species, I think he's still in infant category. So he might be in the clear. He might be okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. But the Mandalorian says, the magistrate sent me to kill you. I didn't agree to it. I'll help you with your problem if you see to it that Grogu is properly trained. And Ahsoka seemingly accepts those terms. A few other thoughts in the scene besides the I can't train this Jedi, he's too emotional, has too many attachments thing. Besides that, I really enjoyed the moment where Grogu uses the Force to grab the ball, and you just hear how proud the Mandalorian is, like a father. Good job, kid. You see how excited he is. And I thought that was good setup for later where Ahsoka calls him out, saying, you're like a father to him. Before they sort of team up and head off to attack the village, Ahsoka asks if the Mandalorian saw any prisoners. And I thought I wonder if I missed something there, but it seemed like she was very specifically concerned with those prisoners. We need to get them to safety, which I agree with, but that seemed like just one part of the plan. Like we also need to take out all these soldiers. We also need to get to the magistrate. I wasn't sure why she specifically asked about the prisoners. Don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that or if it was just a little bit of an odd line.
Yeah, I don't know.
Odd line.
Stumped. I kind of think it's a red herring or like a note, like an executive note that they had to throw in to address some kind of weak plot later in the episode.
Got it. Okay.
That's cynical.
Well, yeah, it kind of reminds me of, it's not really the same, but in Man of Steel, when Superman is getting into the final fight of the movie, they wipe out like half the city. So people were complaining, like, you probably just killed a bunch of civilians. Then you go to watch Batman v Superman, and in the final battle, like every 2 minutes, you hear, we've evacuated the city. We've gotten everybody out of the way. So we've got to make sure to call out those prisoners. We're going to make them safe.
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's to make sure that we know that Ahsoka is virtuous, and kind of going back to what you said at the beginning of like, it seemed like she was the aggressor, to sort of dispel any myth that she was.
And then in the very next scene, she's the aggressor again. So, but sure, yeah.
Well, so let's go to the next scene. We get to the attack, and I thought it started pretty cool where you see the guards on top of the gate, and then suddenly in the distance, you just see Ahsoka running towards them. She flies on top of the gate, attacks everybody, cuts that bell that they use to signal the attack. She cuts it in half.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that looked really cool. Then she approaches the magistrate, throws down a piece of Mando's armor as if to say, I took out your bounty hunter. Then the guards start firing at her. She flies off. The magistrate orders the prisoners to be executed, but the Mandalorian sweeps in at the last second to rescue them. Ahsoka starts stealth killing a bunch of people. All of this leads to the Ahsoka versus magistrate duel and the Mandalorian versus Lang duel. But before we get to that, Jeremy, what did you think of this whole attack sequence?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the cutting the bell thing was awesome. The guy trying to use the mallet against her that he would have used to hit the bell was really cool. Like, just everything about the action was, I don't know. It's like the cool Jedi stuff you always want to see, like a Jedi doing that. In spite of Star Wars being so many movies about Jedi, overall I would say you don't see as much of that, like really cool, like why they are so powerful and can take out like all these people in these creative, like flipping around stealth and ways. It was really awesome. To jump back to the scene right before again, there was one line that Mando has at like the very end of it that I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic or not, when he's like, a Mandalorian and a Jedi, they'll never see it coming. And I was like, is he kidding? Like they're not going to see it coming, right? Like that's what he was being was he?
Yeah,
he was being...
I took it initially as he was being sarcastic because we're really going to stand out. Jedi, Mandalorian. But then I remembered that right now the legends are that the Mandalorian and Jedi are sworn enemies. So actually they wouldn't see it coming. So I don't know. Dan, what do you think? Sarcasm?
No, it's funny. I think Jeremy kind of hit the nail on the head. I think that line was intentionally supposed to be very tongue-in-cheek.
Okay.
And like, it's a wink to the fans that like, okay, obviously that this is not that unlikely of an alliance at this point because he's not like most Mandalorians and she's one of how many Jedi left. And but yeah, I think they're really the creators are really kind of trying to sell the lore at the backstory of the ancient kind of rivalry / feud, I guess, between Jedi and Mandalorian. I'm curious to learn more about that and see if they give us any more of that. But at right now, at this point in the story, it seems like they're kind of on equal, playing fields almost in terms of their orders.
I thought the delivery was a little weird, but I think it was meant to be serious.
Oh, so you didn't take it as a tongue-in-cheek.
Isn't it? It's known that the Mandalorians and the Jedi are enemies,
right.
So I don't think it was meant to be sarcastic, personally, but it definitely was delivered a little.
Well, hey, if you're watching this, let us know in the comments how you took that line, and we'll see. But Dan, besides that, so what did you think of this whole attack sequence?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Great action. I think they do a great job in the show of like off-screen tension. And there's that moment when they did a really good job of utilizing the space and the location of the city and the different side streets. And I thought that the moment when Ahsoka was sort of jumping between roofs and different streets, and then we're kind of following Lang, and he's sort of feeling like he's being stalked. That moment where you can kind of tell that his guys on the other street had just met their untimely end. That was great. So yeah, I was all in at this point in the episode.
Yeah, I was a big fan of this whole sequence. I already mentioned the sort of stealth attacks we saw in the cold open. We see even more of it here, sort of Batman style, where the bad guys are hanging out, and then suddenly Ahsoka is there. Also reminded me a little bit of an episode last season. I think it was the prison escape episode, where as much as I've railed against that episode, there was one.
This keeps coming up.
I know, it comes up every episode. I don't know why. But there was one moment that I really liked, and I think everybody was kind of a fan of it, when Mandalorian goes into stealth kill mode. The red lights start popping up everywhere, and he keeps getting closer and closer to the bad guy. So it's almost like you're watching Alien, but Mandalorian is the alien. So this reminded me of that a little bit, except now Ahsoka's in the role. So I really enjoyed that. And you also just see cool stuff, like seeing a big bell get cut in half. They know it looks cool, so they stay with it, so you can watch both pieces roll off the side of the building and then clash onto the ground. And we didn't need to see that, but I wanted to see that because it looks cool. So I thought it was a really great scene. Alon, one of your favorite moments in the episode, I think, occurred during this scene.
When the robot did that little flip onto the ceiling.
Right, when he says,
awesome.
Somebody, I think Lang orders the droid to get up there, pointed to the roof of a building, and I was wondering, how's he going to pull this off? And he jumps up, kind of grabs the edge, and then does this weird little flip to get onto the roof.
Tuck. Yeah.
The tuck and roll.
Cool. Like, who thinks of that? Who thinks of like, well, he could just jump up, like thrust up, and no one would think twice about it. But instead, let's have him like jump up feet first, and then like reverse curl the whole rest of his body into upright, like some weird like Terminator 2 looking. He's forming up thing. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about last episode, where it felt a little bit like Jon Favreau getting to play with all of his toys. Last episode, I didn't think it worked quite as well because it was kind of, here's one villain, here's another, here's another. This is where it's sort of the good version of that, where it's these creative ideas like the droid, how he gets on top of the roof. These creative ideas you get from somebody you can tell has a passion for this and likes to just sit there and say, what would be cool to see with all the tools we have here? By the way, a few folks in the chat, Gilgamesh says, this episode was so good, this is the way. And I think we can all agree with that. Hello to Jello Formello says, 'tis the season. Which it is the season. And so I agree. Gilgamesh also asks, was Ahsoka using force speed at some points?
I think so. I mean, definitely her jumping ability is not normal human ability. So yeah, I think so.
And Robert,
unnatural.
What was that, Jeremy?
I said unnatural.
That's right.
Dark side stuff.
And Robert Pratt says, hi guys, I loved Rosario's gait and how she'd tuck her arms into the poncho like the cartoons. Small stuff like that I appreciate. So Rosario Dawson is the actress who played Ahsoka Tano in this episode. Jeremy, did you watch any of Rebels or Clone Wars?
I haven't seen much Rebels. I've seen a decent amount of Clone Wars. I'm very far from being like a veteran that can rattle things off about it, but I'm semi-familiar with it. And I would agree with all those like little touches, which I mean, it's unsurprising. This whole show is such a, like, you could tell, as you were just saying, it's made by people that really clearly care about the property and are passionate about it. And you can tell, I think basically anywhere you look, you can tell.
Right. Yeah, and I was curious, just like I said, I thought, at least visually, and that's really the only familiarity I have with this character, because I didn't watch either of the shows. I know what Ahsoka Tano looks like. I thought they translated her to live action very well, but I'm curious for somebody who watched the show, how they translated her mannerisms and her personality, and sounds like they captured it pretty well, even some of the little details, so that's awesome. Anyway, then we get to the climax of the episode. So we get to the lightsaber versus Beskar spear duel, Ahsoka versus the magistrate. And simultaneously, you have Mando versus Lang in sort of a classic gun duel. And in both cases, our heroes win. But we get a couple of cool moments. Ahsoka holds the saber to the magistrate's throat. And this whole episode, we know that Ahsoka wants some knowledge. We don't know what she's after. Then finally, with the lightsaber to Magistrate's throat, she says, "Tell me, where is your master? Grand Admiral Thrawn." So that's another pretty big reveal this episode. We'll get to that in a second, but I'll pause there to say, Jeremy, what did you think of both these duels? How does this lightsaber duel rank among the many lightsaber battles we've had in Star Wars lore?
Yeah, I really like this duel. It was, I mean, as Dan pointed out before, that set that they're standing on there is just really, really cool looking. Kind of the classic, like they're in it like a fencing kind of duel almost, where they just have that one long line to be standing on. Kind of unique weapon setup that where it's a spear against someone, with using two lightsabers, and she uses, and then one lightsaber, and then she turns it so she's holding it kind of in the upside down way. It was really cool. I thought there was a lot of like unique stuff, a lot of great moments, and it was just doing that classic Star Wars. I mean, I'm sure Star Wars didn't. Not the first people to do this, but all the like going back and forth between multiple battles, like always makes me think of Star Wars. Like I always think of what I loved so much about Return of the Jedi, where you're watching like them attack the base at the same time as Luke and Vader and the Emperor are dueling up and going back and forth between those two things. And I think it just allows like for a slower thing, like the Mando and Lang standoff with their little lines and the dialogue that might be a little cheesy otherwise, like you almost don't get enough time to think about it. It's just really cool with all that stuff where he's going like, sounds like you might be winning, or we could be winning, or I could lose, or you could win, and whatever. They were just
spectators at that point.
I just really liked it. I just thought everything looked really cool. It was good, as good tension as you can get, probably knowing the outcome in advance in a show like this. But I thought it was really, really cool. I really liked it.
Yeah, I did think it would have been really bold of them to kill Ahsoka Tano here.
That would have been unexpected. Yeah.
I agree with pretty much all of the above, except I really did not care for the Mando Lang duel, and I found the cheesy one-liners to be a little bit distracting. So I usually like the cutting back and forth. Worked great in Return of the Jedi, where you have that small fight between Luke and Vader when you have the big battle going on outside, versus here you have this great fight between the magistrate and Ahsoka Tano, and then it cuts to, we're a lot alike, you and I, Mandalorian.
We're not so different, you and I.
Just the cliched. Yeah.
So actually, one of my favorite things about this sequence has to be the sound design that they, I think, introduced here for lightsaber on Beskar impact, which, I mean, if you think about it, the soundscape of Star Wars is some of the most iconic, arguably just as important as the visuals and music going back to the 70s. So I think we have a well-established archive at this point of what lightsabers sound like on multiple things, and so to hear a duel like that and to hear the Beskar kind of making that like ringing sound, I thought it sounded great, and it really just deepened the show continues to deepen and shed more light on the world, and I thought this was one of those moments that I thought worked so well. Yeah.
That is one aspect of the Mando Lang duel I did appreciate, which is it was pretty cool to hear the sounds of the battle from a distance. And you know how often I compliment the sound design and the music of the show, and that continues to be, I think, one of its most positive qualities. Alon, what about you? The duel between Mando and Lang, the fight between Magistrate and Ahsoka Tano. Any other thoughts?
So first thought is with that dude and the lady, I think that it would have been better if we saw some skills portrayed from both of them earlier in the episode, so we'd care more about these fights. The lightsaber battle with the Beskar spear, I kind of wish they just stuck with it and showed us like the battle, because it could have been pretty cool. Instead, they're like just showing us like in general. I agree with you guys. I like the concept of like jumping back and forth between two battles, but here I wish we could stay with it a little longer and see more of that action. And then I agree with you, Gil, on that guy. Just who do you think's winning? Who do you think's gonna win?
Could be my guys, could be your guys. We'll see.
Could have been funny. I don't know if this guy delivered it very well though.
Yeah.
So any of you guys really think that Mando is going to fall for the ruse of him laying his weapon down?
That was probably my least favorite moment, when the guy's like reaching down. He's putting his gun down slowly, and then he sees the Mandalorian move his hand away from his holster. And then it cuts to a close-up of the guy's face where he goes, he's like, I got you.
I mean, the guy should have just completely surrendered, then waited till the last second to try something. If you really wanted to, whatever.
That's right. Well, a few people chiming in the chat. From earlier, Diane Abella says Ahsoka Tano was played very well. All wisdom and compassion and intimidating. Agreed. I think we were all fans of her this episode. And then for the duel, Gilgamesh says definitely some more acrobatics would have been nice, or some force powers. I was pretty happy with what we saw, but I mean, like all good things, you always want more. So, like Alon said, I would have loved to have seen more, would have loved to have seen more of that battle. But what we got, I thought, was pretty solid. Let's talk about Thrawn, by the way. So I won't pretend to be an expert on Grand Admiral Thrawn, but I know people love this character. Usually Adam is here with us, but he's been busy with other things lately. And I know, though, that he read some of the older Star Wars novels that were written before Disney took over and they kind of wiped the slate clean. But Thrawn in the old Star Wars novels in the early 90s basically took over the Galactic Empire after Return of the Jedi, rose to power using tactical brilliance and cunning. They say he's one of the most threatening antagonists in the Star Wars universe. And he's different from Darth Vader because instead of punishing failure and dissent, we all remember Jeremy, remember how he always chokes people with the Force?
Of course, classic Vader move.
So
or Anakin, as he's otherwise known.
Darth Vader? Darth, right.
Unlike Vader, Thrawn rewards. He promotes creativity among his crew.
He's a carrot guy, not a stick guy.
Exactly. He accepts ideas from subordinates. So he's an interesting character. They wiped him out of existence when Disney took over, but they brought him back into canon. He was in a couple of seasons of Star Wars Rebels. By the way, voiced by Lars Mikkelsen, or Lark Mikkelsen, I might have misspelled his name here, but the older Mikkelsen, his younger brother Mads, was in Rogue One. So another Mikkelsen has joined the Star Wars universe.
Galen Erso.
What?
Right. That was his character. He's talking to me.
It's like, what did you just say?
That's Mads Mikkelsen's character in Rogue One.
Gotcha.
Great character.
Jyn Erso's dad, the Death Star scientist.
So Thrawn has, I think this is the first hint that he's still around after Rebels. Jeremy, did you interpret this to be Thrawn may play a role in this show? He's going to end up being the master, the puppet master behind everything? Or is this more of a hint, an Easter egg, maybe set up for a spinoff or another series?
I mean, I guess I want to say Easter egg, maybe just because I don't, or if it's setting up something, it's setting up something like way down the line, because I assume Giancarlo Esposito will be like our big bad, so to speak, for the time being. The only thing that it makes me maybe think otherwise is because they're so it's such a big moment when she says it that it feels like you're supposed to react to it and want to know more. And I guess that, I don't know, I guess that would be frustrating for someone who wasn't familiar with Thrawn and like the background lore, or just feel like a weird out of place moment. Maybe I'm overthinking that though.
I definitely think that they're establishing some kind of importance for that character. I don't think in this season. I would be surprised, probably down the road. Actually, and so talking about Moff Gideon, I actually think that this reveal that there is yet another, a bigger, badder villain kind of lurking in the shadows is one thing that I think that the show does a little too much. And I kind of wish we would get more Moff Gideon at this point, just more interaction with him, because I think we talked about this last time, Giancarlo Esposito is just such an incredible actor. And I think he's at this point being very underutilized. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that they don't just kind of like, bump off Moff Gideon the way they bumped off the client. It's like, oh, you think he's in charge? No, like there's someone, pull a rank, and there's always a bigger fish, right? And so I'm hoping that Thrawn is sort of very much down the road, and we get plenty more from Moff Gideon before that happens.
Right. That was exactly my reaction. I felt like we're not done with Moff Gideon yet. We've barely seen him. And like you said, first we had Werner Herzog, right, as the client, and then he goes away. We find out, no, it's actually Moff Gideon. And here it was almost, oh, is it actually Thrawn now? But I did take it more. Actually, Gilgamesh in the chat here says he thinks it's more of an Easter egg. And I agree. I think this is going to either be set up for something further down the line, or it's just giving us an update on the greater Star Wars canon, telling us Thrawn is still out there. Maybe he'll show up here. Maybe he'll show up on the Obi-Wan show or on one of the other series that we're working on. I know that there were rumors that Ahsoka Tano could end up in her own live-action Star Wars series, her own spinoff, or in another series. So it could be set up for that. Either way, I'm pretty excited by the prospect of seeing Thrawn in live action. Just by reputation alone, he sounds like a pretty awesome character. So I'm excited by that. Also in the chat, Robert Pratt says Filoni was able to pay homage to both Star Wars inspirations at the same time, Western and samurai films between the two showdowns. I think that's true. Like I said, one of those showdowns didn't work quite as well for me, but in theory, I like the idea. I think that's cool.
Did you notice in the concept art too, in the credits, the duel between Ahsoka and the magistrate, at least in the art, was more inside inside that kind of palace. It looked like much more of a kind of traditional kind of samurai fight inside, and I think then they moved it out, kept it outside in the gardens. So I was curious to see what the inside of that building looked like.
Maybe we'll find out on the spin-off series.
Yeah, that's right.
The Magistrate spinoff.
The Magistrate and the Marshal.
Dude, is the Magistrate dead now? Are we to assume?
I did not assume that. Actually, I mean, I think they never showed us, right? Like they never closed that loop. I assumed not, but it was sort of weird how quickly it went from that duel was over, from that kind of cliffhanger to the scared man at his door is now like been promoted. So
right.
He's the new magistrate.
So Alon had the same comment when we watched it, but the guy that basically became, I don't know, in charge of the town or whatever at the end, I assumed maybe he was in a position of power, and then when the magistrate took over, so they're just putting him back into position. Otherwise, I don't know why he would have gotten that promotion.
It's like, oh, villager character promoted.
Villager number 3.
Right, exactly.
Anyway, the next morning, the town is celebrating. Everyone's happy. Ahsoka offers Mando the spear. He says he can't accept it. He didn't finish the job. And she says, no, but this belongs to the Mandalorian. So he takes it back. Then he goes to bring, what's his name? I can't remember Baby Yoda's name. I'm already forgetting.
Grogu.
He goes to grab Grogu and say goodbye. He wants to leave Grogu with Ahsoka to be trained. And then we get, I always compliment the music, we get this almost like piccolo or flute version of the Mandalorian theme song, which I thought fit really well. It was this kind of sad, triumphant goodbye. So Mandalorian goes to grab Grogu, and then Ahsoka says, you're like a father to him. I cannot train him. So she's going back on her word. Mando says, you made me a promise, and I held up my end. And then she says there is one possibility. So now we find out, where is Mandalorian heading next? She says, go to the planet Tython. There you will find the ancient ruins of a temple that has a strong connection to the Force. Place Grogu on the Seeing Stone at the top of the mountain. Then he says, then what? And she says, then Grogu may choose his path. If he reaches out through the Force, a Jedi may sense his presence and come searching for him. Then again, there aren't many Jedi left. May the Force be with you. Mando flies off, music swells, Ahsoka smiles, and walks back to town. Credits. Jeremy, what did you think of the ending there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it's great. It's a classic Mandalorian thing. Now that thing is done, well, there is this one place that might be able to help you, and then she sets him up on sets his marker on whatever the next thing is. I was fine with it. I think I've accepted that that's the way that this show works now. Like one set thing ends and the other. I do think the way that they left it off there, going into this, figuring that we might see Ahsoka was like, oh, is she going to play a role? Is she going to tie in like a lot more than this episode? That ending to me made it feel like that could easily be, we don't see her again in this show. Unless they do another, she has to come back at the end because of Moff Gideon or something else. But it felt very like contained, everything there. The town is fixed. She's made her peace about not training Grogu, and you can't stay with him. He's a father figure. Like all this stuff wraps up, and the planet's done, and now on to the next thing. So I liked it. I thought it created put a button on stuff, and also sets up all these new questions for what's going to happen at the Seeing Stone, or are they going to get cut off before they get there, or whatever. So I liked it, and I agree with you. The Piccolo version, or whatever it was, version of the song was excellent.
And by the way, Jonathan 10597 in the chat says Tython is the planet where the Jedi Order got its start in Legends. And when we say Legends, that basically means Star Wars canon before the slate got wiped clean by Disney, right?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if that's still the case. I know that there's a Jedi temple on Tython, a very old Jedi temple, but I thought that Last Jedi set up Ahch-To, where Luke was hanging out, as kind of where the Jedi Order got its start. Like, that was the first temple.
That was sort of my thought when she mentioned this. I was like, God, how many ruins of ancient Jedi temples are there, that have just been undiscovered are there in this world? But yeah, I thought the ending was nice. I do disagree, though, I think, with Jeremy. I think I kind of read this ending with Ahsoka as definitely sort of like that's all we're going to see from her for now. But I'm convinced that she'll come back, probably even this season. I would be kind of surprised if they invested so much in her character to not see more of her. And although there is kind of a sense of closure a little bit with, she loses, I don't know if it's like ruined, but she lost one of her two lightsabers in the pond. So I don't know if that's like, she's sort of been humbled in that way. But yeah, I'm definitely curious to see what happens next from that storyline. But that's been happening all season, right? They introduce a new character like Boba Fett at the end of episode 1, and there's sort of all these threads now that are dangling, and in some way they're going to have to all be picked up again.
So they can get their Rise of Skywalker Avengers, you all came type moment in the finale when Moff Gideon, the Frog Lady jumps in and
Frog Lady. Did you know, by the way, in the on Wikipedia, the official name of the page for that character is Frog Lady.
That's how they credit her in the show.
Name.
It's always funny to see if you watch with closed caption on, they'll show you a character's name, and so I saw Frog Lady, and I thought that was interesting.
There are so many things in Star Wars that they never show on screen that have crazy, specific, made-up, wacky names, and this person who is a major player in 2 episodes is just called Frog Lady.
I think that was intentional. I think that's them winking at us. Exactly that.
Sure,
just like, we're going to call her Frog Lady. And then her husband, Frog Man. No joke.
Yeah.
That's their names.
Well, this is the next big mystery. We were all wondering for 13 chapters, what is Baby Yoda's real name? Now we're on to the next thing. What is Frog Lady's name? That's what we're all going to be wondering. Big reveal next season.
We will always call her Frog Lady, though. Always.
Diane Abella in the chat says, how can another Jedi help if she couldn't? Which I think is a good point. I can't train him. He's too attached to you. It's a vulnerability. Maybe go see if another Jedi is willing.
Yeah, I think Ahsoka does kind of pass the buck a little bit here. And I think it's a survival technique. And I actually have to say that this episode it not only answered a lot of lingering questions and gave us a lot of information about Grogu's character and backstory, but it finally did for me something that I was waiting for several episodes now, which was just give that character more agency and kind of more compelling stakes. Like I really like the idea that Grogu is sort of hiding his force ability as a survival technique. I thought that was really nice. And so I think Ahsoka is doing the same thing.
Right. And actually, I was thinking about that this episode because last week, after the mics turned off, we kept talking a little bit, and you guys were basically saying we need to see something from Baby Yoda. I'm not complaining yet, but we're at a point now where we're ready to see something from Baby Yoda besides us being cute and funny and everything. And this episode, we got it. I thought that was a really cool aspect to his character, the fact that he feels afraid to use the Force, because we've seen him hesitant before, and I always found it odd. You could save the day right now, but you add this element to it where he's afraid to use it. I kind of wish we saw a little bit more of that. Like we saw hints of it, even more than we did, but I do like that they added that aspect to his character, gave us some more of his backstory.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense.
That, yeah.
It makes sense. Like less, it's sort of like, it has to be like adrenaline induced almost. It's like only when the stakes are really high, someone's about to be killed, their whole bar is about to be blown up.
Or there's macaroons nearby.
Right. Or he's super hangry. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's Baby Yoda? Who's Grogu going to find on that Seeing Stone? There aren't many Jedi left. Jeremy, who's going to come calling? Who's going to answer the call?
I do, just because from Dan talking about it earlier as like, is he Yoda's, child or something? I do think it's hilarious, the idea of like a ghost Yoda showing up and someone being like, this is obviously your kid, right? No one, and he could be like, well, that could be anyone's baby. Like there is, I don't know what you're talking about.
Whoa, right.
There's only two people that look like this in the entire universe, and he has to like deny parentage.
And they both had like rooms at the Jedi Temple in the same era.
Yeah.
It's the Abe Simpson meme where he walks out he walks in and just quickly walks out. Father Yoda shows up. He's like, "Nope, I'm out of here."
Nope. It's like, God damn it.
I don't know. I mean, they could go I don't know. I feel like he's not going to get there. I feel like Moff Gideon will cut them off before they get to Tython and will be left without a answer. Because I feel like we just got so much information on Grogu. I can't see them giving us like, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't see them giving us that much more in this season. So
I agree. And I actually thought that right after the kind of town started celebrating, it's like, oh, you brought peace to the village. Thank you. Where's Grogu? And Mando's like, oh, he's back on the ship. First I'm thinking like, good God, man. Like how many times? How many times are you going to leave your kid?
I left him in a hammock.
Right. And so I was convinced when I was watching it, I was like, oh God, all right, we're going to go back and he's going to have been kidnapped by the Empire because we know that Moff Gideon's on his tail. So I agree with Jeremy. I don't think they're going to get very far at the end of this season. I mean, we know that was, the dangling plot thread from last episode was that they know where he's heading. They're tracking his ship. So it's just a matter of time before everything goes to hell.
In the chat, Diane Abela says, isn't Luke the only one looking, by the way? Luke Skywalker, he's out there, right? What's it? Yeah, this is post Return of the Jedi. This is before he's gotten depressed with, what's the name of the bad guy from Force Awakens?
Ben Solo. Kylo Ren.
Yeah, Han Solo.
Whoa, spoilers.
Ben Solo.
Robert Pratt says it's got to be either Ezra from Rebels, Cal Kestis from Jedi Fallen Order, or Luke Skywalker from the Christmas special.
Touche.
That's funny. So there's a lot of chatter on the internet about like, is this how they're going to incorporate Mark Hamill as, younger Luke? I don't think so, just for a number of reasons. I think Mark Hamill's made it pretty clear he's sort of just done portraying Luke Skywalker, and I don't see why he would come back for this. But I think, a character like Ezra, or one of the other Jedi from some of the other tie-in content and stories, I think makes the most sense, especially now that the Mandalorian has shown a real pattern and a strong ability of incorporating threads and characters from other stories. I think that's what we're going to get more of.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. It does feel like we're going to get to a point where it's almost weird not to at least mention Luke Skywalker. Because now we're bumping into Ahsoka. They're getting closer and closer to the Jedi. And I got to think post Return of the Jedi, when you bring up that word and you say, I'm looking for a Jedi to train Grogu, Luke Skywalker's got to be top of mind. I don't know if he's going to appear. It would be a little bit... I mean, they have the technology now, I guess, that gets better every year to de-age Mark Hamill and bring him in. They could do it.
Did you ever see The Irishman?
I did. But that would be pretty shocking. What was that, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not expecting it, but they did do that quick flashback scene in Rise of Skywalker with him and Leia training. I don't think they'll do it. I think at most they will allude to Luke, or maybe we'll see, a hooded figure from the back. I think they'll give us like a very kind of thinly veiled reference to Luke at most, but I don't expect to see like him play a significant role in this show.
All right, well, we'll see. We've brought up a few kind of plot threads that are open. I totally forgot that we saw Boba Fett probably
Right.
in like the first episode this season. Moff Gideon's after him. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in these last 3. I wonder if they're going to. I think last season they kind of squeezed in one more standalone for chapter 6, and then 7 and 8 were pretty connected and kind of wrapped up the season. That's when we got the Avengers style. I got to get all my old friends together. So I hope Ahsoka shows back up, but I could see them being hesitant to bring her in for the final battle because that does kind of lower the stakes a bit. Now you've got a Jedi on your side. She's shown herself to be a badass, able to take out a lot of enemies pretty quickly. So they might want to leave her out of it. Just bring back the other 2 marshals. Maybe have Boba Fett show up and make it a little bit more of an even battle. But we'll see. Any other thoughts before we wrap up, Dan?
Yeah, sort of speaking to that point, I did notice before this episode, I kind of went back and quickly scrubbed through the trailers for this season, and I noticed that every shot that we had been given in any of the promo materials, trailers or like the other TV spots, had already been seen in the first 4 episodes. So it was really nice having a completely, having no idea what to expect at all visually this episode, and obviously that will continue the rest of the way. So that does give me hope that we're kind of in for a lot more really impactful and surprising things the rest of the season. And so I'm not convinced that we'll have really any more of the kind of one-off, the prisoner break type episodes the rest of the way. I think we could be, I think things could be getting better from here the rest of the way, which I think would be awesome. Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I didn't do the trailer deep dive again. But I mean, I hope we do see a lot more stuff. Sorry, I was looking at I noticed that I jotted down during again. I think we basically covered anything. It was cool to hear. I think he cited specifically HK-87 assassin droids, and like HK-47 was a big deal in the like Knights of the Old Republic games and all the Star Wars Online Old Republic stuff. So that was cool to hear that stuff. Little like Star Wars lore drops, which are obviously all over in this. But no, I'm really excited. I think I'd still, we've been talking about it for like an hour now. I still feel confident in saying that might have been the best episode yet, or at least in the top 3 or 4 of the whole series so far. And I'm much more excited for more than I was a couple weeks ago, I would say.
Awesome. Alon, any thoughts on the episode we didn't already mention?
No, I think overall I liked it. Again, if it remains at this quality, I'm happy.
All right. Awesome. Well, hopefully you're happy. Hopefully you stay happy. I do think overall I'm enjoying season 2 more than season 1 because we bring up the standalone episode versus lore thing a lot. And when it comes to a standalone episode, I don't have a problem with that intrinsically, but I do think it puts more pressure on the episode because they need to get you to care about what's happening a lot faster. And I felt like in season 1, they usually failed to do that, at least for me personally. I think it was chapter 4 was the first totally standalone episode we got. And there was, again, the story of helping out this village, and none of the village characters were really developed. So I didn't really care about them.
But that was the best of the bunch, I think, of the 3.
I agree.
Last season, that was by far the best one.
Yeah, 100%. Then it was, I forget the one after that, but then I know chapter 6 was the classic prisoner one. That's right, the Tatooine episode. So, this season, I think the standalones have been better than last season. And even when they suffer a little bit, they have been kind of parsing out some of the grander story stuff that offsets if I ever feel a little bit disconnected from the kind of monster of the week. So for me, overall, season 2 has been better than season 1, not by a large margin. And I'm pretty excited to see where we go next. They've set up a lot of really cool stuff. And we'll see. Hopefully we get some good. I'm wondering what this season's Darksaber is going to be. Is there another big reveal coming in the final chapter? We'll find out in the coming weeks. I think with that, we can wrap up. So I'll just say, if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon so you get notified the next time we do a video or the next time we go live. And by the way, Jeremy, what does it mean if you subscribe to this channel? What does that mean?
You are just one of the smartest, best, all-around people that you could possibly want to do.
Exactly. If you subscribe and you hit that bell icon, you join the ranks of Gilgamesh, Robert Pratt.
You are who we grow beyond, or something like that.
That's right. What? See, that's a great line from The Last Jedi, the much maligned episode 8, which I am a big fan of.
What was the line?
I'll say it. They are who we are who they grow beyond. Nah, I can't get it right now. it's when Yoda and Luke are watching the tree burn. We are what they grow beyond. Someone put it in.
Totally interrupted my momentum. I don't even know what you're babbling about.
Sorry.
If you subscribe to this channel, you join the ranks of Gilgamesh, Hello to Jello, Formello, Diane, Abala, Robert Pratt, and all the Jonathan 10597. Can't forget about him. You join the ranks of all these people. You become an amazing human being, and you get to be part of the chat, part of the conversation. So you're going to want to do that. And with that, thanks for watching, and see you on the next One Take.